Supreme Court is corrupt, Congress is a rubber stamp, and the president is lawless, what happens next? And so J.D. Vance is now saying that he and Donald Trump don't obey federal judges. He tweeted, quote, "Judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legislative legitimate power." This is how autocrats run things. It's an extraordinarily dangerous moment. And I think it's important that we put this in a historical context. It was Tuesday, July 17th, 1787, when 50-some-odd men got together at the what was then the City Hall in Philadelphia. It's now called Independence Hall. To write the Constitution. And they drew their inspiration for that day's efforts, that July 17th, 1787 effort, from Charles de Montesquieu, who had published a book. He was a French philosopher and a philosopher. In 1748, he wrote a book called The Spirit of the Laws. And in The Spirit of the Laws, Montesquieu pointed out that it is absolutely critical that if you want to have a government that doesn't devolve into tyranny, that doesn't become an autocratic, strongman, single-party state, that you must have at least 3 separate branches of government that have relatively equal powers relative to each other. In this case, the legislative, Congress, the House and Senate, the executive, the presidency, and the judiciary, the courts. In fact, this is a quote from his 1748 book. He said, "When the legislative and executive powers are united in the same person or in the same body of magistrates, there can be no liberty. Again, there is no liberty if the judiciary power be in the legislative and executive." So as this topic came up in the morning of July 17th, 1787 in Philadelphia, James Madison stood up to speak. And, his words were recorded. He said, by quill pen, but recorded. He said, "If it be essential to the preservation of liberty that the legislative, executive, and judiciary powers be separate, it is essential to a maintenance of that separation that they should also be independent of each other. In like manner, a dependence of the executive, the president, on the legislative would render it the executor as well as the maker of laws. And then, according to the observation of Montesquieu, tyrannical laws may be made that they may be executed in a tyrannical manner. Montesquieu conceived it to be absolutely necessary to a well-constituted republic that the two should be kept distinct and independent of each other for guarding against the dangerous union of the legislative and executive departments." In other words, if the president were ever to dictate all terms to Congress, which then became a compliant rubber stamp, regardless of how excessive or even illegal the president's actions became, that, Madison said, finishing his little rant, quote, "may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny." We're there now. In simplified form, basically the system that Madison and his compatriots came up with was that the legislature creates agencies and funds them, the government. The president's job is to, and this is a direct quote from Article 2, Section 3 of the Constitution, to quote, "take care that the laws be faithfully executed." Of course, the laws were created by Congress. And the role of the Article 3 courts is to make sure that neither overstep their authority and independently arbitrate disputes between them. Those decisions must be final. The Supreme Court's decisions must be final for the system to work. However, we've had this 44-year-long war against American government, against American democracy, against James Madison and the founders, that was funded by a bunch of, initially some fossil fuel billionaires, later a larger group of billionaires, now the tech billionaires are in on it. This was originally called the Reagan Revolution, then it was called the Bush Revolution, then the Trump. There's 1,500 radio stations, there's 3 television networks, there's multiple newspapers and other publications, over 200 TV stations, hundreds of billions spent to purchase and then elect politicians. And all of this American democracy and government, after 240 years, is finally on the verge of collapsing and being replaced by something very much like Viktor Orban's Hungary or Vladimir Putin's Russia. Both houses of the Congress are controlled by Republicans, and in both cases, every single Republican senator and member of the House of Representatives has just rolled over and said, okay, Donald Trump gets whatever he wants. The president, so that's the legislative branch. The executive branch, the president is just nakedly breaking laws and just saying, Congress, courts, I dare you. And the courts, are just beginning to weigh in, but now J.D. Vance comes out over the weekend and says that he can do whatever he wants. He can ignore the courts. And in fact, the only way courts can have their opinions enforced is by having federal marshals do it. And who do the federal marshals work for? Oh, that's right, Pam Bondi. And who does Pam Bondi work for? Oh, that's right, Donald Trump. This is Pam Bondi, our Attorney General, who's investigating FBI agents who were looking into Donald Trump's crimes when he stole top secret documents from the White House, took them down to Mar-a-Lago and left them out where Russian spies could wander in and photocopy them. He conveniently left a giant photocopy machine there too, right next to them. Wasn't that nice of him? This is the very definition of a constitutional crisis. When one branch of government says we're going to completely ignore the other branch of government, or even in this case, the other two branches of government, and just do whatever the hell we want. We don't care what the law says. We don't care what the courts say. And we're going to find out. I mean, we're already hearing stories that even though a federal judge told Donald Trump and Elon Musk that they cannot suspend federal payments, that farmers in the Midwest and people all over the world are not getting federal payments. That money is being withheld in order to finance tax cuts for billionaires. And here we have, and by the way, this was all facilitated by the Supreme Court, by 5 corrupt Republicans on the Supreme Court in Citizens United in 2010, saying that bribery is just fine. If a billionaire wants to own a politician, no problem. And so here comes billionaire Elon Musk saying, I'm going to own Donald Trump. It only costs $270 million. Not even $1 billion. Not even $500 million. So, and then we look at, Elon Musk. Well, what's in this for him? Well, let's just go through the list. The FAA administrator had launched an investigation into SpaceX. Now he's been fired. The Department of Justice was looking into possible violations of securities and others laws by Musk and Tesla. That investigation is probably going to die. The USAID Inspector General was investigating Musk's Starlink. He's gone. The Department of Defense's Inspector General opened a review into alleged failures by Musk and SpaceX to properly disclose contact with foreign leaders, like Putin. He's been fired. The USDA Inspectors General was investigating alleged animal abuse at Neuralink, Musk's brain company. He's been fired. The National Transportation Safety Board, overseen by the DOT, had several open probes into Tesla. Odds are they'll be dropped if they haven't been already. The EPA had settled multiple lawsuits with Tesla for hazardous waste violations and violations of the Clean Air Act. Now that the EPA is being gutted, there probably won't be any more. The National Labor Relations Board, overseen by the Department of Labor, had 17 open investigations against Tesla and SpaceX for unfair labor practices, safety violations, and discriminatory work practices that are probably now, moot. The FCC was carrying out investigations and had issued court orders relative to Musk's business. The Federal Trade Commission was overseeing some of Musk's companies and had a consent decree in place. And the Air Force and the Pentagon's Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security had launched reviews into Musk and SpaceX's compliance with federal reporting requirements. I think you can safely say all of these burrs under Elon Musk's saddle have been removed. And if not so far, they probably will be soon. That $277 million investment that Musk made is going to pay billions in returns, it appears. Welcome to James Madison's very definition of tyranny.